Okay, Paul, go ahead and unmute, and you've got it.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Well, I'm pleased to introduce our international speaker today. He'll be addressing Rotary International's #1 area of focus, that being promoting peace. Chris Offer is a member of the Rotary Peace Centers Committee. He will be vice president of that committee next year. He is a Rotary Positive Peace Activator and an Institute for Economics and Peace ambassador. He just completed a 3-year term as chair of the Rotary Peace Major Gifts Initiative Committee, and the goal was only to raise $50 million. Chris has served on a variety of Rotary committees involved in training, fundraising, and membership development. He's a member of the Rotary Club of Landner in Metro Vancouver. He served as district governor for District 5040. He's been a Rotary volunteer in the Philippines, Russia, China, Laos, and India. In 2016, he was part of the team, including the WHO, CDC, and Gates Foundation, evaluating the polio surveillance initiative in Nigeria. He served on similar polio surveillance teams in South Sudan and Sudan. Chris retired from the Vancouver Police Department after 31 years of police service. He served in a variety of senior operational and administrative positions, retiring as a district commander. He has a degree in criminology from Simon Fraser, a graduate diploma from the public sector management from the University of Victoria, and a master's of arts in public administration from Carleton University. Chris is an accomplished photographer. His photos have been published in local and national newsletters, books, and calendars. He enjoys street and natural photography. He is a frequent speaker at Rotary events, and I'm very pleased that he agreed to speak to our group. Chris, welcome to the Rotary Club of Bellingham. And if you can unmute yourself, hopefully you have presentation privileges, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It really is great to have a chance. You're so close and yet so far away, it seems these days. It's challenging. I'm in the city of Delta, which is on the US border. Point Roberts is our neighbor, which is for the people in Tsawwassen and that part, all our gas stations that are closed off to us. So we crossing the border for gas was a great pastime in my area. And in Point Roberts, I think the only place in Point Roberts that doesn't take Canadian dollars is the US Post Office. So most people have 2 cash drawers, one US and one Canadian in Point Roberts. So we're looking forward to the border being open again. It's been a long, long time. But it's great to talk to you today about Rotary's peace initiatives. I really want to touch on a wee bit of history, very briefly, on Rotary's involvement in peace, our very important partnership with the Institute for Economics and Peace, our peace centers. But most of what I want to talk about today is what you could do. What could the members of the Bellingham Rotary Club do? What could your district do locally and globally about peace? So let's get started. A quick review of Rotary's history. We go back really more than 100 years, but this year is we celebrate 100 years of the 4th object of Rotary, which was peace and world understanding at the Edinburgh Convention, Rotary Convention in Edinburgh, Scotland. This was proposed, which to us today seems, a motherhood statement. It was actually quite controversial. This is post-World War I. Isolationism was more common, stay out of foreign wars, and Rotary was going the opposite direction, be more international. Up to then, Rotary had been very local, and this was more of a global step. So what we think of today is something that would be quite an easy thing to accept was a really very much debated if you read the history there. Jumping ahead, 1942, middle of World War II, Rotary clubs were instrumental in starting UNESCO, which we know about for the heritage sites, but more of the educational focus in 1942. And of course, most of you have heard the involvement of Rotary in establishing the United Nations in San Francisco, both as Rotary was invited as an official observer group, and many of the delegates from around the world, including my own in Canada, the ambassador to the United States, chief from Canada, was also a Rotarian and represented Canada at the forming of the United Nations. So a lot of Rotarians involved in that. Jumping right ahead, our Peace Centers, 1999, and our first graduating class, 2004. And I think really a seminal occurrence, 2017, our partnership with the Institute in Economics and Peace. And I'll talk more about that in a little while. And this year, the first class started at our newest Peace Center in Makerere University in Uganda. And we'll talk a wee bit more about that. Another kind of way to look at Rotary history of any topic is through the pages of the Rotarian magazine. You may not be aware that every single issue of the Rotarian magazine has been digitized, and it's available through Google Books. I picked out just 3 covers that sort of depict some of the history. Of course, the first one, 1917, Woodrow Wilson on the cover, Woodrow Wilson's 14 statements of peace, the League of Nations, and ironically, of course, rejected by the US Congress, never passed in the United States, but many other countries did. But his 14 points really did establish a lot of the discussion on peace globally. In 1938, the cover of the Rotarian magazine, a person looking out in the graves from World War I, talking about it never happening again. Of course, less than a year later, Europe was at war again. And the 1946 cover, a Russian sailor, beginning of the Cold War, and trying to understand Russia. And maybe that's something we're still trying to do today. But an interesting way to look at it. So just to understand that Rotary's been involved in peace for well more than 100 years. And we're really getting into it even more so. So this Institute for Economics and Peace, it's an Australian think tank, research institute, offices in New York and several Mexico City, and several offices in Europe. They work on this concept of negative peace, positive peace. Negative peace, really the causes of the conflict stop. The conflict stops, the shooting stops, but often the causes remain. Positive peace is getting more, not just stopping the violence, but getting into the root causes, the attitudes, institutions, structures about positive peace. And that's really where where you can become involved, that important part of working with us. The Institute for Economics and Peace certainly weren't the first people to come up with the concept of positive peace. Many other people. This is on the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C., one of the quotes that is engraved on the wall of the memorial. And Martin Luther King in 1967 talked about positive peace. And many other people have. But I think what the Institute for Economics and Peace has done, and why Rotary has partnered with them, is they've put some real structure to it, to programs that you can understand. So that's the important part of it. They didn't originate it, but they really developed it. And these are the 8 pillars that the Institute for Economics and Peace came up with. And we can't go into them in this short meeting today, but I'll tell you how to learn more about them during the meeting. These 8, and they're all connected by lines. And that the purpose of that, it's a systems approach. If one goes down, for instance, sound business, if the country doesn't respect business. Business can't operate, the others are affected. If low levels of corruption, if corruption goes up in a community, all the rest are impacted. And the free flow of information, a topic we talk about a great deal right now, has become very, in Canada, the Canadian government is looking at legislation to control some social media. Many people are very worried about governments controlling social media, but people are also worried about social media controlling social media. So it's a dilemma of coming up with, should anybody control it, or the free flow of information. So it's a dilemma and part of the concepts of peace. Let me take one of those, jump back here. Just one of those, equitable distribution of resources, not equal, equitable. And this famous poster describing the difference between equality and equity, and an important distinction. Equal does not necessarily mean equality for everybody. So interesting. And it was mentioned in the introduction, my background was as a police officer. I love, so, and part of my career in policing, I was the officer in charge of the traffic section in the city of Vancouver. So I don't know what the speeding rates in Washington State are. In British Columbia, up to 20K over the speed limit. So what is that? 612 miles over the speed limit. It's about $138 Canadian fine for the first speeding, then above more than 20K over. Well, other countries have a different approach, and this particular one is Finland. And Switzerland has a similar approach, and like a couple of other Scandinavian variations of this. And they say that's not equitable. You know, in Canada, if a single mother earning minimum wage is caught for speeding, she pays the same fine as the stockbroker driving the Lamborghini. If they're both doing the same first speeding offense, same fine. We say that's equal. Finland says no. They fine people based on their income. So you're fined so many half days of income. So the single mother pays a fine of maybe $100. They've had fines in Finland of several $100,000 for speeding. This ticket on there, 54,000 euros. I don't know what the exchange rate for the US dollar is, probably $75,000 speeding ticket. So they have a different definition. So just this little argument or little shows how difficult these 8 pillars of positive peace are to define and work out when we can have different approaches to what's equal and what's equitable and the others 8. So what does Rotary do? How does Rotary fit into these areas? These are our 6 avenues of focus. And as you may be aware, July 1st this year, we'll have a 7th, the environment. We'll have 7 areas of focus. They don't fit exactly to the 8 pillars of positive peace, but there certainly is a relationship. And countries with positive peace, the research over and over, higher income, better environmental outcomes, better growth in the countries with positive peace. Not surprisingly, countries that are constantly at war are going to have a lower income. Not surprising. I don't think you need research to justify that. You can with the dollar amounts. This is the Institute for Economics and Peace publishes a number of books or reports each year. They take research, their own research, but research from all around the world. They have factors and they rate countries on how positive, how peaceful they are. And remarkably, in our Western Hemisphere, North, Central, and South America, we currently have no hot wars, which is the first time in many, many generations there hasn't been a war, a civil war, or a fighting war in Central or South America. Now, Venezuela is teetering on great difficulty. Colombia, that was doing well, literally this weekend had major riots over a tax reform all across Colombia. The government is back down in Colombia and going to go back to the drawing board about their tax reforms. So these countries are difficult. We certainly should be very concerned about that big swath of red across Russia. What it is. The 2021 report will come out in a couple of months, but they're an interesting ways to look at them. This is the highlights of the report. Really plateaued. Some countries got more peaceful and some countries got less peaceful. Homicide, terrorism, import, export of weapons, political terror, refugees, all influence the degree of peacefulness in countries. So that's how they come up with these notions or these factors. But that brings me really to what that's a very brief overview of the concepts of positive peace. That really brings me what I really want to talk to you about. What can you do about it? So these pictures are from Colombia. After the government of Colombia signed a peace accord with the FARC guerrillas 4 years ago, 5 years ago, ending decades of civil war in Colombia, the Rotarians in Colombia said, what could we do? What can we do as Rotarians to help the peace accord? It was a very difficult. It took several votes in Colombia to get it passed because it gave amnesty to the FARC guerrillas and gave amnesty for the government. And at times in Colombia, like most civil wars, it was difficult to know who was worse, the FARC guerrillas or the government. So both sides got amnesty, which people weren't happy about, but that's the way it is. And it's still teetering. But Rotary decided to do a whole series of positive peace projects. The Rotarians, the local, not somebody imposing it from outside, but the Colombian Rotarians. And my district, 5040, and a district in Utah, we helped finance a large global grant, and they worked with Rotaractors and YMCA members and did a whole series of positive peace. And the hand puppet there is kind of interesting. A lot of children saw their siblings, their parents disappeared or murdered in front of them and wouldn't talk about it. This Rotaract member realized that children would talk to a hand puppet. They would start a dialogue, a discussion with the hand puppet about what had happened. And that was a good transition to them getting help and understanding what had happened to their siblings or their parents. The guy in the lower left with the funny wig on is actually a police officer from Bogota and a Rotaract member, and probably similar to Washington, certainly similar to British Columbia. Low-level nonviolent crimes, small drug offenses, don't go to jail. They get community work orders. And in Colombia, in Canada, it's not run by the police, it's run by corrections. In Colombia, it's actually run by the police. And that was his job. Typically, nonviolent offenders got a red jumpsuit and they had to go out in the road and pick up garbage. He actually arranged for them to attend as an alternative, a positive peace workshop. You know, some did it just to get out of picking garbage. Some had an impact on it, but it's an interesting approach to what Rotary do. In addition, while there, I was in Cartagena at this event celebrating all these peace projects. We gave some awards for the best, and there was some training of Rotaract members and Interact members. And I don't speak Spanish, so I never quite figured out what they were doing with their hands over their head, but they're having a lot of fun doing it. This was in a very old hotel in Cartagena, and that mural on the wall is sort of interesting when you're talking about peace, because the mural on the wall shows the Spanish invaders and the indigenous people kneeling down to them, and we know the consequences of that in North and South America when the Europeans arrived, the impact on the indigenous people. So kind of an ironic mural to have in a discussion on peace. So let me jump ahead. What can you do? So that's what the Rotary clubs in Columbia did, what can you do? The first thing you can do is take the Rotary Peace Academy course. It's about 4 hours. It's free. Goes into those 8 pillars of positive peace and how Rotary interacts with them. You can do it all at one sitting. You can do it over several days or several weeks, several modules, but it's well worth, particularly when we're still stuck at home a lot, the Positive Peace Academy. The other thing is, what can the Bellingham Rotary Club do? And you may be doing lots that I'm not aware of. We know during COVID, alcohol consumption is up, and that has resulted in increased domestic violence. Many Rotary clubs are looking at that as a way to work with the community, reduce violence in the community. Emphasis on programs of dialogue, looking at international projects. This graphic takes Rotary's 5 core values: fellowship, diversity, leadership, service, integrity, and focuses them on how they interact with the 8 pillars. And the other thing that your club can do, and the deadline is quickly approaching for this year, but nominate somebody for a Rotary Peace Fellowship. Which means I jump ahead to the Rotary Peace Centers. There's our newest Peace Center in Uganda, and it's actually they're meeting in Uganda. They're allowing in-person classes there at Makerere University, and so they're sitting. So we have these 2 programs: the master's programs, 50 candidates a year, and the professional certificate. Now in Uganda and in Thailand at Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. And it doesn't cost your club anything. These are endowed, and you may have heard, through a very generous gift of $15 million US, we're starting another peace center. It's fully endowed in the Middle East. I don't know which country or North Africa. No matter which country is chosen, it will be controversial. Count on it. But it's a couple of years away, but we will have a new certificate program in the Middle East. So actually getting involved in peacemaking, peace building in the center of where the most volatile part of our world is today is a good step for Rotary. COVID update: our peace centers are doing well during COVID. We didn't close any down. We missed 1 class in Chulalongkorn, Thailand, insisted on closing 1 down, but we've been able to pivot with the universities based on which country rules they're having. Uppsala in Sweden, there is some in-person meeting classes. And as I said, in Uganda, all the rest are virtual. But you think about what that means. If somebody in Seattle is attending the Rotary Peace Center in Japan or Queensland, Australia, that may mean they get up at 4 in the morning to attend a class. Just because you're studying at home at a foreign university doesn't mean the classes are that compatible to your schedule. On recruitment of Peace Fellows, you can see these are the qualified candidates. They've been going up. This isn't all the applications. These are just the ones that meet the qualifications and got an in-depth review. The good news, it's going up. The bad news, it's going up. The good news, we're getting more and more highly qualified candidates, a bigger pool of candidates to choose from. The downside, of course, many Rotary clubs and districts are nominating people and they're not being accepted. There's a cross section of the class that started this year. A good mix of countries, 117 people, 63 countries. A male female mix, just a good mix, and that's not by accident. And as I say, something you can get into. The deadline is a few weeks away, or think about it for the next Rotary year. So let me end with this. I've got 4 takeaways, 4 action steps, requests for you. 1 for you personally to take the Peace Academy course. 1 for your Rotary Club to consider nominating a candidate for the Peace Fellowship. to take on a peace project, whether it's local in your community or international, and continue financial support for the Rotary Foundation, whether that's the Peace Centers or other part of our foundation. We're like all organizations need your financial support to continue operating. So thank you very much for your time. And if time allows, happy to try to answer any questions.
Chris, this is Paul. Do you have some success stories to share? One or two of Peace Fellows that have graduated and what they've gone on to do in terms of making a difference in our world?
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the things Rotary did. So those who've been in Rotary, around Rotary for a number of years will remember our ambassadorial scholars. They actually started in 1947, so 70 plus years, well, until they were done away with, and the global. We lost track of a lot of our ambassadorial scholars. When the Peace Centers fellowships were established, Rotary made a strong commitment to keep track of them. So we were able to track about 95, 96%. We know where they are, what jobs they are, and there's regular contact every year with them to keep them in touch. So we have the Nobel Peace Prize this year was won by the World Food Program, United Nations World Food Program. Several Rotary Peace Fellows worked there. In fact, one did their strategic plan, was hired by the World Food Program to work on a strategic plan for them that was instrumental in getting that. Did they, win the Nobel Prize? No, but they were part of a team that won it. I count that as a big success. Linda Lowe in Seattle is an interesting case. Originally from Vancouver, was working for the Red Cross in Switzerland when a Swiss Rotary Club approached her about applying for a scholarship. She applied and was accepted, went to Duke UNC University, and then took several jobs in Seattle, and just changed jobs. And I'm trying to remember what she's doing in Seattle. So anyhow, there's a number of Peace Fellows that are working that for the Jimmy Carter Peace Foundation in Atlanta. I think it's in Atlanta. Several Peace Fellows are working there. The Institute for Economics and Peace, their new executive director in New York, is a former, is an alumnus, a Peace Fellow. There's good stuff happening.
Thank you, Chris. Other questions?
Chris, this is John Dunn. I really applaud the efforts that you're doing, and I'm impressed that the peace initiatives are so much further along than I had realized. They're a great development. I've read a couple of historians who have espoused the idea that peace is a brief interlude between various wars. I'm not sure exactly what you think of that idea, but it does occur to me that with the shifting climate, the growing population, the refugees, that the underpinnings for conflict continue to shift and grow. And I'm wondering kind of what your thoughts were about that.
Yeah, I don't, I don't think war is a natural thing for people. I don't subscribe to that. I understand the use of force. I was a police officer for 31 years. I understand that, the last thing any police officer wants to do, contrary to what some people would suggest, is use force, because the chances are the person that's going to get hurt is you. And the same in the military. The use of force is the last thing you want to do. And I think our times between wars since World War II have been greater. so I think things are potential. There's always the potential for war and conflict. As I said when I was talking, Venezuela is teetering on major problems. Brazil's economy is tanking. That can always be a catalyst for violence. So there's a variety of things that can trigger these. We don't know what's going to happen in Afghanistan. That has a history. My grandfather was in the British Army at the turn of in the 1890s in the Khyber Pass as a full-time British soldier fighting in Afghanistan, and more than 130 years ago, and we're still there. So I don't know. I wouldn't try to predict what the outcome of some of those things would be.
Thank you.
Like Andy has a question.
Chris, on your heat map, United States was yellow, and envious that above us Canada is green. Was there a time that United States was ever green in terms of peaceful?
I don't know. Part of those are the factors that they use to interpret peacefulness, and you can agree or disagree with them. For instance, military engagement outside of your country. The United States, whether good or bad, is involved in many conflicts. The world's policeman is a phrase. There's a conflict in the country, and we all turn around and say, "What is the United States going to do about it?" I know your country has the debate: stay out of these wars, get in these wars, and so that is part of it. They calculate the dollar expenditure on military. Homicide rates, the US homicide rate remains high. So there's domestic factors and external factors. They export of weapons, export of military weapons to other countries, they use as one of their factors in determining a country's peacefulness. So you really need to look at the report, where the United States is, and the factors, how they interpret it, to understand it's not a negative, it's what you accept as that. And I don't think using the criteria of the Institute for Economics and Peace, I'm not sure the United States would ever be green in that map, because so much of the world depends on the US military as a countermeasure against other countries.
Chris, this is Mark Nettle. I got a question. I admire what you guys are doing, and I'm glad to see that. I'm just curious, though, in a lot of countries, taking a stand for peace and trying to change some of the situation on the ground there would put Rotary in a position of taking political stands, and which is something Rotary generally doesn't like to try and do. How do you avoid that? I mean, how do you avoid getting involved in politics and some of this stuff?
Right, definitely difficult, and it's really not us guys; it's us, all of you. You're part of Rotary, so it's your.
Well, yeah, I mean all of us, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And how you define politics, Rotary tries to stay out of it, but it's very difficult. Other issues, women's involvement, forced marriages, or that in some countries that we may oppose to, Rotarians may do projects to stop that, can be interpreted as possible. Educating girls in Afghanistan can be interpreted as political. The Rotary can only, do these issues if they're interpreted as political. They're not political in the sense of supporting a particular party, hopefully, or political cause, rather than supporting something that advocates for peace. And our seventh area of focus, the environment. Some Rotarians or some people will interpret that as political. I don't think so. I don't think protecting our environment is political, but certainly some people will interpret it. So I don't know how you get away. The notion of being apolitical, I suspect, is impossible for any organization, any person to be apolitical.
Ann Jones, did you have a question?
And you muted.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I kind of have a different feeling about wars. Ever since I was born in 1936, it seems to me there has been war until now. And then I'm not talking about skirmishes between countries, or I think of those kind of things as sort of a couple arguing, although of course they're worse. But I think because of the bomb, and possibly all of us, if you look back and see the way people treated each other 100 years ago, now I think in almost, I don't know about other countries, but anyway, we try to be more able to negotiate. What I'm getting to is I don't think there's going to be any more world wars. I don't think that because of the atomic bomb that we are going to partnership, say, with Russia, and then other countries will partnership with China, and then we'll all get together and have this gigantic third world war. I don't know if other people are thinking that way at all, but I kind of thinking that this that the bomb has kind of made the age of the tyrant over. Nobody like a Hitler is going to be able to stand up and say, I'm going to take over the world, because if they do, we'll drop a bomb on him or her, and that'll be the end of it. I mean, that's the threat. I don't know that anybody would do that, but I think it's going to be a lot calmer. And I think the bomb, and this is a terrible thing to say, but we did drop the bombs on Japan. People saw how awful war could be. And I think that that's made everybody to some degree, and I could be just romantic here, think a little bit more. That's just my silly opinion.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I can answer that, or I guess I can say I don't agree with you. I shouldn't. Hopefully, we don't depend on nuclear power to keep peace. I think there's a place for it, but we've seen through history and recent history how a fuse can be lit, and we find it difficult to start it. Taiwan sits as a fuse point where the United States and Canada play this silly game where we don't recognize it as an independent country, but we recognize it for everything else, and it's sort of because of not to offend China. China. There's two Canadian being held for almost 2 years in Canada because we're holding a Chinese for extradition to the United States. I don't know if you follow all that, but it's big news constantly in Canada. Canada asked us to extradite a person, and that's been going on in and out of court for 2 years. China retaliated by seizing 2 Canadians and charging them with espionage. So, there's a big bully there that at some point may have to be dealt with. I don't know, but dialogue and discussion needs to continue. But there's a number of flashpoints: North Korea, Taiwan, that need to be watched carefully.
Thanks, Chris. I think we're out of time, and thanks for your insights and your program and dedication to world peace. Gary, back to you.